If you have a hard time with boundaries, how might your life be different if you could say no as easily as a joyful yes? I'm Love Coach Mariya, and for over a decade now, I've been encouraging folks to empower their compassion so it's big enough for ourselves as well as others, and so our boundaries can become healthier than ever. You're listening to Empower Your Compassion, and on this show, we'll be unlocking transformative insights to help you reconnect to your true yes, so you can say no from that more expansive energy and get more of what you want in your relationships and your life without sacrificing your compassion. Are you ready for more love? Let's grow. Hello, my friends. Valentine's Day is almost upon us, and I know that collectively we have some pretty mixed feelings about that, but whatever your feelings, I hope you find some inspiration in today's episode. My guest today is a colleague of mine. Her name is Beverly Biehl, and she is a Feng Shui master and transformation guide who helps people move from chaos to clarity. Blending ancient wisdom with modern intuition, she aligns both spaces and inner lives to create harmony, abundance, and joy. And if you stick around to the end, I get some tips out of her for what to do Feng Shui wise to help optimize your love life. Let's dive in. Thank you so much for joining me, Beverly. It's a delight to have you on my show, and thank you for having me on your show previously as well.
So nice to be able to have this kind of exchange. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today, Mariya.
Yeah, thanks. So this episode is going to be airing during Valentine's week, which is very exciting for some folks, less exciting for others, but I'm going to have you tell me a little bit about what you can do to sort of help folks in that area. But I just also want to say I really appreciate the fact that your mission in your work and the gifts that you bring to the world is to remind people that they are enough and can create a life filled with love and joy. And I find that very touching. So tell us just a little bit more about what's not printed online about what you do and what you enjoy about what you do.
There's a lot of nuance that goes on in what I do. And, Mariya, I got into all of this work because of a medical issue. I had a breast cancer diagnosis when I was only 36,
Mm,
two little kids at the time, and, was pretty much panicked because there was nothing in our family history
mm,
that would indicate that I should, why would I be getting this? I did all the genetic testing. It was all negative. It was just like, well, okay, universe, you got some jokes.
mm, mm,
Um, but what it did help me with is, again, I'm kind of keep trying to bring it all back to relationships. What it helped me understand was that I had zero boundaries. I
mm,
had zero energetic boundaries. I was the youngest of eight, and I had, incredibly overwhelmed parents. I had internalized this people-pleasing order that I had to be Little Miss Sunshine and try to be no trouble at all so that I wouldn't add to the overwhelm that my parents were already dealing with. I took that to the extreme. And what happens when you take that people-pleasing tendency to the extreme is you end up giving yourself health issues. There's a lot of studies that talk about women who stuff their emotions and stuff their own desires and their anger and their frustrations. Uh, they're the ones who end up getting autoimmune issues.
mm,
So mine just happened to turn into cancer. Yay.
mm,
But when I started really looking around my house after I was doing this, just the book reading part, not necessarily even going to any of the 9 different teachers or any of the different classes that I started taking, was correlating a lot of the internal processes, the internal dialogue, the faulty belief systems that I had in my head, and noticing how they were showing up in my space.
mm,
Rooms that weren't being used, with piles of clutter that would accumulate in certain parts of the house, areas of the house where I would tolerate leaving broken things or avoiding repairing items. It was all of these things that were showing up, and my house was doing its darndest to talk to me And I used feng shui as the Rosetta Stone to try to understand more about, well, what are you trying to say? It's a lot more than I'm tired of this bed in this position, or I need to paint. Yeah, it's all part of it, but it really is about shifting the mindset to match, so that the external environment matches the internal environment.
I definitely find it really fascinating how there's like that mutual feedback, like how the internal environment can influence our external environment and how the external environment can influence our internal environment. I know for me, I definitely feel a lot more mentally cluttered when my surroundings, especially my home, is cluttered. Um, or even any workspace too. It's just it's like noise.
You are spot on. It is noise. And even when you think you've stopped seeing it, it's still there. It's like that little pebble in your shoe that it sometimes it comes up and it bothers you, but most of the time it kind of slides back underneath the pad. And it's those little irritants
Mhm.
that add up.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, yeah, what it does is it makes it much more difficult to handle the big irritants when they come up.
Oh, sure. Because yeah, you're already your brain, even though you're not super conscious of it, is already diverting resources to dealing with
100%.
smaller things.
Yeah. One of the big things with feng shui is in this, there's like it looks like a tic-tac-toe grid with the Bagua map. And in the center section is the health sector. And that's physical health, mental health, financial health, spiritual health, emotional health, all of that. And if that's off balance, it's like you think about a tire, like a bicycle tire. If the tire isn't lined up properly on that, you're going to get the uneven wear, and it's going to be real wobbly, and you're not going to be able to have the control you need. And if God help you, should the like in my case when I had to go through all the chemo and radiation and surgeries to become cancer free, that when that hub breaks, everything else doesn't matter. If your relationship with your family is not great, okay, that's a spoke that kind of makes you wobble a little bit and can flump forward. If your jobs, if you get laid off and you need to get new skills to do something, okay, you get retrained, you can kind of fix that and move forward. If your love life is going to crap, well, you still have seven other sectors, seven other things that are typically working. But when your health goes, it just makes you don't go. But back to relationships. I've been married for 35 years. Same husband. Okay. So it's one continuous go. But if you're looking for someone to bring in, the relationship part of the Bagua map falls in the southwest corner. How you find this is you stand at the front door of your house, and on your phone, you have a compass app, and you can stand as if you're walking out the front door, and that will tell you what your facing direction is on your house.
Hmm.
Um, because each direction corresponds with a different aspect of life in feng shui. And so once you see what that is, you can see, well, okay, does my, like in my situation, my house faces east. So I just have to look to see, okay, well, where's south? So it's going to be right behind me and to the right and behind a little bit. So that's my southwest corner. It's my guest room. I just need to make sure that I have pairs of items in there or things that represent a happy relationship. So that's one of the ways that I like to use feng shui with relationships. The other thing that I found, I had one client who'd called me up kind of, oh, she was desperate. Usually people who call me, they call me when they're desperate. It's like, call me before you get desperate. Let's set things up before it
A little
becomes
proactive.
proactive. Yeah, that'd be a lovely thing. Um, she was I was her last ditch effort before she contacted a lawyer,
Mm.
because she just felt invisible in her house. She just felt invisible with her husband. They used to get along so well, and she just was so unhappy. Well, and I went in, and this house was pristine. You could,
Stark,
it
sterile.
very sterile, very stark, very orderly.
Mm-hmm.
He was a military man, so
Mm.
everything was lined up and perfect. And I looked around and I realized, okay, do you understand, to my client, do you understand that you're only present? I mean, the only part of your personality are these two throw pillows on this bench in the entryway that nobody ever uses, that nobody ever sits there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so where else are you disappearing in your relationship? And when I pointed that out, she just burst into tears because she also had that people pleasing
Mm-hmm.
tendency. She had that subconscious inherited programming that says women have to make sure that they cater to every whim of their man, or else they will be thrown out into out of the house and eaten by wolves.
Right.
And I didn't hear anything from her for several months.
Mm.
And I just checked in with her after about 4 months to say, how'd everything go? It's like, oh my gosh, that was so transformative. We're actually going now on our second honeymoon. We're leaving next week.
Oh, wonderful.
So, sometimes, again, we're talking about what is your home trying to tell you? And
Mm-hmm.
how can we work on making sure that it is a blend?
Mm-hmm.
My one of the things that my husband and I have had to work out throughout the years is, for the most part, do whatever you want with the house, honey. Um, don't touch my office.
That's him speaking to you?
That's him speaking to me. That's him
Mm-hmm.
speaking to me. Do not touch my office.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, all right, fine.
Which quadrant of the house is it in?
So right now, in this particular property, it is the southeast, which is long-term wealth and abundance. So it works beautifully.
Perfect.
It works beautifully. Yeah, there's some things in there that I would love to go and do something with, but I've gradually put a few plants in there and, you know, giving them as gifts.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the plants get in there. But yeah, in our previous home, he was actually in the career sector, and I mean, again, it's kind of interesting how it works like that, but the way that it works is the north is the career and life path sector. The northeast is the skills and knowledge sector. So, what kind of skills, what kind of knowledge, how do you use those to make money? Or what skills and knowledge do you need to learn more and to in order to enhance your career? The east is the family and ancestors sector. It's also the one that deals with legacy building. So if you're having challenges with your family of origin, take a look at what's happening in the East. um, in the Southeast, as I mentioned, it's the long-term wealth and abundance. It's also about how if people have challenges with their relationship with money, that's where it's going to show up, is in the Southeast.
Mm.
Again, a lot of times there's a little crossover between the East and the Southeast because, like in my case, I was taught your typical religious upbringing. It's easier for a rich man to enter heaven than it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I really had to deconstruct a lot of that. Um, but the South is the fame and reputation sector.
Mm.
So fame and reputation, what is it? How do you want to promote yourself? Like if you're in sales, that's what are people talking about your product? It's about speaking your truth. It's about like public speaking. It's also about what are they saying about you when you're not around.
Mm.
So it's that reputation. The Southwest, as we talked about, was relationships and love. It can also be business partnerships or any other kind of partnership that you have. For example, if you're involved with a group, like an industry group,
Mhm.
maybe on the board of directors, it's the other people on that board with you that also will be impacted by the South energy of the Southwest sector.
Interesting.
The West is children and creativity, creative problem solving, The West is it's about any kind of projects. It's also project management. So again, if you're struggling with project management, or are unable to stay on target, you might want to check out what's happening in the West. The Northwest deals with helpful people and travel. It's about getting ideas from outside of the general, outside of the, like your inner circle. You want to look outside. So again, it doesn't mean that you have to go travel internationally, but hey, twist my arm. Yes, let's go. Uh, it's about, are you willing to accept help from others? Or are you willing to be that helpful person for somebody else? So how generous are you with your ideas, etc. So that's, again, we already talked about the center and how all of those kind of go along.
Wonderfully eloquent overview of the Bagwas and the sectors of our homes and how they influence our inner world and our lives. Yeah, it's really fascinating how, again, how the external can influence the internal, can influence the external, and like that loop. Um, and speaking of, houses and borders and boundaries and energy transfer and flow and whatnot. You mentioned before the call personal energy protection. And is that something that Feng Shui can play a part in, or is that something that's more just general energy work? What were you referring to with that?
So yes and no. It's because Feng Shui is simply a study of energy and how energy moves. It stands literally for wind and water. So
Mm,
Feng is water. So it actually should be water wind because Feng. You'll see tea shops around that are called like Feng Cha or something like that. It's basically the tea shop, the water. Water energy is the tangible. That's how your furniture is placed. That's how your um, the colors on your wall, the artwork that we have behind us right now, the clothes that I'm wearing. I can actually advise people on their best colors if I do their Chinese astrology charts. The wind, though, is the intangible. That's where this personal energy protection comes in because we can feel the effects of wind. We can't see the wind. When we are among people, we're constantly picking up on the energy that they're putting off. Heart math has there's a whole field of study that's called heart math, and it talks about the energy field that is put out by our hearts. That's why when you meet people, you say, "Oh, we just clicked. We just vibed so well." It literally is because your frequency that you're putting off is a harmonious match.
mm,
And that's part of the reason why you'll meet somebody and you can just tell, wow, you're dealing with some depression. They
mm,
might have a big smile on their face, but if you're sensitive and you trust that those inputs, you're like, yeah, not sure what they're covering for, but it's a mismatch.
mhm,
What their frequency that's coming out versus the external, visage, that you can feel there's that disconnect. Um, with the personal energy protection class, that was when the first time I took it, it was called energy hygiene. So I will use those terms interchangeably.
mm. Hey friends, real quick, in case you're busy, which you probably are if you have a hard time with boundaries, I just wanted to make sure you know that you can go to boundariesthatfeelgood.com and download a free resource for making boundaries easier without sacrificing your compassion. Again, that's boundariesthatfeelgood.com. Okay, let's get back to the show.
I didn't know that I had been an energy empath. And I obviously had been one my entire life. I just knew that because I grew up on a farm, and I just knew whenever I'd go out and I'd hang out with either the pigs or the horses or the chickens, mostly the horses, I felt better.
Mm,
I felt at ease. I could feel my entire nervous system relax. And I would get to be around some other people and I would notice my own personal behavior changing. I
mm,
would I would act either more hyper or I would, become even more withdrawn depending upon who I was around just as a small child. As I got older, again, you throw in unconscious people pleasing with unconscious energy absorption from everybody else, all kind of leads to not necessarily the healthiest of individuals. And I would joke when I was in college, all of the troubled, all anybody who had troubles on our floor in the dorm would come and talk to me, and they'd be like, "Oh, Bev, thank you so much. I feel so much better. I feel like I've just had this huge weight lifted off of me." And I would think, yeah, and that truck just hit on me. And I would joke that I had paper towels for shoulders because everybody would come and cry on them. It wasn't until I took that first energy hygiene class that I learned some techniques on how to turn the volume down on all the radio stations that had been playing in my head. You talked earlier about, the clutter around you and how it's this like talking to you, this hum. When you don't know how to disconnect from everybody else's energy, they're basically playing their song in your head 24/7, and after a while you just learn how to ignore it. You
Hmm.
become nose blind to it. Well,
But
when
again, this is like what you were saying. If you've got a bunch of pebbles that you can kind of disregard, then you don't have the resources left to deal with something big.
exactly. Exactly. And so, again, for me, what was happening is it was showing up as an inability to stay focused. Again, ADHD, maybe that's really what it is. Um, the inability to stay focused and the inability to just be on time,
Hmm.
because again, that time blindness, because your attention is on ignoring all of the other stuff going on. And again, physical issues. I had irritable bowel syndrome. I had a hard time sleeping. If I tried to read, I would fall asleep like that. It was crazy the things that I would just power through. But when I took this class and learned how to disconnect all of these cords and cables and hooks and whatever else you want to describe, for a hot second I felt it was so unusual to only hear my voice in my head and to
Hmm.
be aware of only my energy and my thoughts. And for a hot second, it felt lonely.
Hmm.
And then I realized, wait a minute, that was the pattern. That was the pattern of that unconscious pattern that I had been carrying, that my job was to pay attention to all these different signals so that I could adapt, so that I could pretzel myself in whatever way was necessary to make them okay at my expense.
Yep.
And it was a muscle that I had to work on. Of course, it still gets a little loosey-goosey at times because, you know, you kind of let down your guard. It's like the holidays, eating over the holidays. Yeah, no big deal. You wouldn't normally have pie 2 or 3 times a week, but it's the holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just let everybody come back in the head. So, I've got,
Right.
10,000 channels going at the same time, no.
Oh man.
Um, but yeah, so that's why this personal energy protection class it was such a game changer for me, and especially with as chaotic as the world has been lately. Being able to stay grounded and find the tools so that you can stay connected with source and with the earth with as a minimum of external inputs, that's only going to help you stay regulated. And a
Mhm.
regulated body, a nervous system that is grounded, then makes your own heart coherence more calming and easier to be around, and helps others calm themselves too. And as long as people are grounded, we can take a lot. We can withstand a lot. It's when we are not that we get knocked off balance.
Well, it sounds like you're also saying that like when you're grounded and you've got that emotional regulation and energetic regulation, it's easier for you to then influence that outwards. Whereas when you're not grounded, you're more likely to be influenced, like to have an inward influence.
Yes. And also, when you're out of balance, you're the one who is bumping into everybody else and causing everybody else to ping pong. And I don't know. I grew up in a time where there were these little toys called Weebles, and they had this little weighted rounded bottom. And they would say, "Oh, Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down." They were just
Yes.
weird little toys, but I would use them as bowling pins, and I tried to roll a ball down them, and of course, they would not fall down. The point is though, but every time they'd get off balance, they would knock everything else off balance. You don't want to be the bull in the china shop. You want to be the one who's able to stay calm, so that the it just again it radiates outwards. Now we all have our moments when we freak out.
Of course.
um, we all have that time, but having these kind of tools and or any other tool that helps you ground,
Mhm.
it just helps you recover faster.
Yep.
You know, that's really what I'm teaching here is so that how to get yourself grounded so that you don't overcorrect and you know mess up everybody else in your path.
Yeah. Yeah, that type of stabilization is really important because yeah, I don't think anyone really wants to run around being a wrecking ball or a bull in a china shop, as you said. So yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like basically we're going to have an impact one way or the other, and if we're grounded, we can sort of infect people benevolently with a grounding and like co-regulation influence instead of when we're ungrounded, we can impact people a little bit more negatively.
Well, again, because of the whole Valentine's week, I I love, hearing about people being in love. I mean, obviously, I've been there for a long time. When you're hearing about other people's happiness and joy, but you're not in that place, it's easy to really kind of be that Debbie Downer. And oh, I don't want to do anything for Valentine's Day. That's just a crappy made up holiday. You know what? Everything is a made up holiday.
Point. Apparently, it's maybe up for debate still whether how accurate this is, but it is a common story that the roots of Valentine's Day stem from Saint Valentine, who existed around, ancient Roman times. And at that time, the Roman Empire was trying to outlaw marriage so that they could make all of their citizens loyal soldiers. They wanted them loyal to the state over anything else, including family. And so they had outlawed marriage. Meanwhile, Saint Valentine was one of few who would continue to perform the marriage rites underground. And then he was caught and captured and tortured and killed. And so he became sainted as, this patron saint of love, like he was trying to let people continue to commit to each other in love and marriage. And so what I like to think about when I'm tempted to feel a little down on myself if I'm single on Valentine's Day is to just remember that, like, I feel pretty lucky that I can marry who I want if I want. I also don't live in a situation of arranged marriages where, like, you're forced into some sort of political alignment. So, like, I'm free to marry if I want. I'm also free to not marry if I want. And, like, that to me is something we're celebrating, if nothing else. So there's always something to be celebratory about.
Yeah, I never did go delve into the history of Valentine's Day. That's fascinating.
hmm And I
Fascinating.
think, if I'm not mistaken, the whole thing about like sending notes, love notes and Valentine's notes, I believe that there was, some secret notes that had to be passed to like make all of those underground arrangements happen. So,
That is fascinating. I know we were just in Portugal in November and visited the city of Tomar, where the Knights Templar
mm,
had their big church. There's a name for it, but the Spanish Inquisition came in and told all the Knights Templar that, okay, I know you've been married, I know you've got families, but if you want to stay in this and not get strung up, you're going to have to go into and be monks now. You
Mm.
can't just be these like priestly warriors. You have to become monks, and that means never speaking to your family again. And many of them, they left, and they left the knights, and they fled with their families because they didn't want to give them up. But again, it many of them did.
Mm.
So I look at relationships. One of the things that I do with my practice, and again, largely because I mentioned before that the East was my sector, my most challenging sector. There was a lot of deconstructing I had to do around the religious aspect, but also the pattern of the people pleasing, also the pattern of never questioning authority.
Mm.
Um, One of my brothers, still to this day, gives me grief because when I was in middle school, he was my Catholic education teacher, and I asked questions. I
How dare you?
challenged things. I'm like, I was in seventh grade, Ed. Are you really going to keep being mad at me about that? You
I
know,
find that when we grow up, I think what seems to be a really big influence for that type of people pleasing and chameleoning, contortionist behavior, and the like defaulting into subordination type of role as well. I think that there's a handful of scenarios that we can grow up in that can indirectly or even directly, but communicate to us that we're responsible for our caregivers' feelings. Even things like, maybe more obvious ones like, oh, you're driving me nuts. It's like, okay, so it's my fault that you feel this way. But sometimes even things like, I'm so proud of you. Again, kind of depending on the context and the languaging, like, okay, now, and it's my job to make them proud. And there's, like I said, just a variety of ways that we can receive this message that we're responsible for our caregivers' feelings. And the thing is, when we're young, we need them to feel okay so that we can feel okay and safe.
mhm.
And so layer that with this sense of responsibility, we learn to prioritize other people's needs, not over our own, but as our own. And that becomes our path to safety. And so I like pointing that out to people, especially if they are feeling some sort of like shame and heaviness from this idea that they're not loving themselves right or enough, or that they're not prioritizing themselves. And I'm like, hey, for what it's worth, on some level, subconsciously, you are. The reason you're looking out for other people is for your safety. It's just some miswiring. Like oftentimes whatever coping mechanisms get us through a dysfunctional dynamic become themselves dysfunctional and outside of that in potentially a healthier dynamic. So just learning to be like, you are prioritizing yourself. Now let's build on that in a more functional, healthy way, right?
Mhm.
And so towards that end, it's a big reason I created the Gates method for developing healthy boundaries. And the very first step, the G in the Gates method, is ground. Coming back to what you were saying about being grounded and regulated, like it all stems from there. It also, brings to mind the hub of health and that grounding and that connection to your body. It's the most important foundation for sure.
I love that. Can you elaborate some more on the rest of the gates?
Of course. So ground in your body and your values. Next step is to assess your capacity and your true yes. So your capacity, like in the moment, like, do you actually have the time or energy for this thing? And if you feel like maybe you don't, when you can connect to the yes behind the no, you can say the no with that same expansive energy as a yes. So for example, the example I always use is if it's a Sunday night and I'm already in my pajamas and a friend invites me out, if I like might recognize that I'm not feeling it, that I'm a no to it, the yes, let's say in this case, is that I'm a yes to staying in. And if I'm not connected to that, my no might come off as either apologetic, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't. And then you're more likely to get your arm twisted. Or it might come off as like, a little extra abrasive, like, no, gosh, it's Sunday night. What's wrong with you? Um, but either of those are like sort of um, unnecessarily sort of like protective and like energetically contracted. But if I'm connected to I'm a yes to staying in, like, and the yes is more expansive, then I can be like, no, I'm good, thanks. And it's just a much more expansive energy for that. So ground, assess, trust in the other person's ability to manage. You don't have to rescue them. You are rarely anyone's only option. Trust that they can problem solve and handle a little bit of disappointment if need be. And I get also that it can be challenging if you have had experiences with others, or especially this particular person, that they don't handle disappointment very well, and they might try and twist your arm or give you a hard time, or it might lead to a fight. Like that can make it scary, but trusting at least in their divine path and their ability to deal with it on their own. And then so once you've grounded, assessed, and trusted, then that's all like the prep. And the E is express your no without disconnecting. So my favorite way to do that is to follow a no with a yes. I'm not available for that, but I am available for this. It's like the corollary of yes and no
Yeah.
but. No but is it also keeps the door open. And it doesn't always have to be apples to apples. Sometimes it can just, it can be like, hey, I can't do that part, but I can do this part, or I can't do it today, but I can do it tomorrow. But it can also just be like, I can't, but thank you so much for asking. Like it can just be like, I still appreciate you as a human.
Mhm.
Um, and then the last part is of the S is steward your precious resources. So it's kind of that ongoing maintenance and following through on what you've identified and communicated as what you need to do to take care of yourself. And of course, also acknowledging the boundaries really are just kind of like your resource limits. They're different from needs. Needs require more of a collaborative conversation, but boundaries they're just your resource limits, and they're your responsibility to manage. So become that sort of noble steward, like, and put the oxygen mask on and stay resourced so that you can show up for the people and projects you care most about.
You know, I love your description and all of that. Those are such key steps in really in energy management, your
Mm.
personal energy protection.
Mhm.
The steward part is spot on. And our time is the only thing that is not renewable. Everything else, you can make more money, you can make more friends, you can buy more clothes, but you can't make any more time. And yeah, that's why sometimes social media is why I get a little, I love social media, I really do. And sometimes it can suck you in and steal your energy. So that's again another reason why just noticing how your body is feeling and noticing how your energy is being controlled by what your feed is. I like to mix things up and search for completely wild topics, especially on YouTube,
Just to
um,
mix up the algorithm.
just to mix up the algorithm.
I love
I
it.
will bounce from political things to tarot and astrology to carpet cleaning videos, anything sourdough making. And who knows what else? I actually happened across. I've gotten it fooled enough that it now actually is sending me videos on dialect coaching, learning how to do new accents.
Okay.
So anyway,
So
that's part of the
fascinating.
curiosity. So my
Yeah.
podcast is the Curiosity Solution, which you were on that as well. But honestly, curiosity for me has been that's the only reason why I'm even here doing
Mm,
this. I got curious about what else could I do to heal from cancer.
mm,
And when my neighbor gave me the book on feng shui, I just kept following that yes, that like you talked about earlier. It's like, well, am I congruent with the yes or am I congruent with the no? And even so, getting back to boundaries, getting back to relationships, getting back to just knowing, am I wanting and is this in my path? Am I in alignment with this? If it's not a full body yes, it's been a full body no for me. And if I'm squishy on something at all, no, I'm not going to do it because again, time is too precious.
it is. It absolutely is. For those with a little bit longer of a timeline, like in your 20s or early 30s, I do think that it's helpful and productive if, done correctly, although it's not a super narrow path or anything, but to do some self-inquiry and even a little bit of self-challenge, especially like um on your nose. Like if you're a no to something, I think it's worth saying, like, am I just afraid? Is this something that's actually good for me and I'm just avoiding it? And you might be like, nope, this is literally not for me. But, or you might be like, well, maybe this is something I should lean into, whatever. So do a little bit of self-inquiry and questioning and challenging, but for like a decade. And if you do that for about a decade, then something I learned maybe a little late was like you have to graduate yourself out of that too, because it can become problematic to like over question yourself all the time. And over the past few years, I have been moving more towards what you're saying. Like if it's not a full yes, it's a no. And even if I notice just like a reflexive no, like if my first impulse is that I'm a no to something, I don't challenge it anymore. And I feel like I might not always be this I don't know, strict isn't quite the right word, but devoted to honoring my no. But I especially was for a year or two. I'm probably loosening up on it a little bit now, but what felt really important about that was building up my self-trust and letting my like inner child understand that like I'm not going to make you do anything you don't want to do. Like for now, like we've done our growth, we've done our work. I feel like I can trust my intuitive hits now. And if I'm a no to something, I'm just going to honor that. I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to challenge it. I'm not going to poke at it 6 ways from Sunday. It's like, if it's a no, it's a no. And it's been such a relief. And I actually ended up quitting my job because they crossed a boundary. I had stated that I didn't want to do this thing they were having me fill in for. And then 2 weeks later, they were like, oh, we're actually going to have you do it full time. Took me about an hour to come to terms with the fact that I was like, I'm not in a position to quit my job. But there was already also a lot of chaos that was mounting at the job, and it wasn't really a great fit already, but I was trying to get myself in a better situation before I left, and I wasn't there yet. But I heard my own like coach's voice come in and be like, you have spent so much time and energy building up your self-trust. This would erode it so horribly if you
Mm.
go, default to what they're telling you right now. And so to me, that was the thing I wasn't willing to sacrifice at all.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Thanks.
And it's hard and it's scary and but what I'm hearing you say is that you looked at the feeling you had and you were able to reframe the fear as excitement
Mm.
in some ways. I mean, at some point.
Yeah, a little bit down the line, yes, but I think I would say that it's more that I guess I prioritized mm, like my values. It was just like whatever I was afraid of wasn't as scary to me or potentially detrimental to me as losing the self-trust that I had built. So that,
Yeah.
I mean, was kind of more of a fear or a scary thing that I just wasn't willing to cost pay.
There's always an energy exchange. And what I'm hearing is that you decided that the energy exchange of your values for that particular paycheck was too high.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Well put. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to respect your time, but also, and speaking of curiosity, and because it's Valentine's week, I would like to ask you one last question. What would you recommend Feng Shui wise people do in their southwest quadrant to support love and romance in their life?
That's actually pretty easy. So
Okay.
there are two things that I encourage people to do. Number one is find a pair of items, whether it is like the traditional feng shui, cure enhancement, if you will, is a pair of mandarin ducks because they mate for life.
Oh,
It can be any other kind of pair. You can get two teddy bears and put them in there. You could get a picture of like some artwork that has two people that are like a couple. It's a pretty common thing. You can see them, where they're walking under a shared umbrella in the rain, and you see them, walking away. But if you have items like if you're already in a relationship, finding images of yourself in a happy time. You can do that. It can be a salt and pepper shaker. That works too, depending on what part of the house it's in. That's if you're trying to bring the relationship in. You don't want to have any broken items in there. You don't want to have any images of single people. I've seen those soapstone sculptures that are actually beautifully done, but it's like a one person, but they're like it's hollowed out in the middle. And I was at a friend's house. I wasn't even there in a professional capacity, and I just looked at that and it's like, how are things with you and your partner? And she confessed that, that she'd been feeling a little lonely lately. It's like, let's try this experiment. Take that piece and hide it away someplace so that you're not seeing it. Move it away from this area and let's revisit in a couple of weeks. And that didn't even take a couple of weeks. It was almost instantaneous that they started communicating better. So that's again the one thing. But the second thing is for someone who's really wanting to bring in a partner and they don't have one right now, I invite everyone to, even if you are in a partnership and you might just want to improve it a little bit, write out a recipe essentially for how you want to feel in that most fulfilling relationship, or the relationship that is most fulfilling. And not necessarily, don't get hung up on what they look like, how tall they are, anything like that, but how do you want to feel? And write it from a state of gratitude as if you already have it. I'm so grateful I have a partner who loves to dance, who enjoys good food, who is healthy, takes care of their health, is funny, enjoys hiking, and that we have fun going to cultural events together. And I feel so grateful that I feel safe, supported, and secure. And this, the equivalent or something better. And then I always write thank you, thank you, thank you at the bottom. If you have a red envelope, that would be a great thing to tuck away into that. Otherwise, just put it in just like a regular envelope and draw hearts on the outside and put that in the Southwest. And know that the energy of that is going to then start filtering through because you're setting an intention. You're setting an intention. If you really want to be an overachiever, do another one of the same recipe, and this time put it in the Northwest because helpful people in travel, that is basically someone's coming up to be a matchmaker. So yeah, do that. And you never know. You might find I've had many different couples find each other uh, through other friends. So why not let them help you find your partner?
Brilliant. I love it. Thank you so much for that very inspiring tip and for our wonderful conversation today. We went all over the place, which is my favorite kind, and it was delightful to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Mariya. I really appreciate you extending the offer.
Absolutely. And thank you for tuning in. You can check out Beverly's show, the Curiosity Solution podcast, wherever you like to watch or listen. And you can learn more about her at theintuitiveinterior.com or on socials at The Intuitive Interior. And if you would like some additional support with your boundaries, please go to boundariesthatfeelgood.com to download a free guide that will walk you through the Gates method that I referenced on an even deeper level and provide some really practical tools to help implement that into your life. And if you really want to dive deep, go to explorelovingboundaries.com to book a Better Boundaries Breakthrough call with me. No charge, no strings, but we will definitely set you up with some clarity, a roadmap, deeper insights into where you're at and what's possible for where you want to go. And wherever you are at currently, I hope that you get to celebrate love this Valentine's Day and every day, of course. And while you're here, please do like, subscribe, and share this show so we can spread the love to the world. And I really appreciate you. Namaste.